Hello, this is the Provoked Prawn, and this is an unboxing and installation video for two different power supply units with the same name but a slightly different colour. The RM850 and RM850X from Corsair. These are two modular power supply units with a really good setup in terms of the overall build quality. I've been using Corsair PSUs for a long time, and this white RM850 was particularly nice because of the high quality cables that come with it. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to install these power supply units, what cables go where, and what they're used for. So basically a talk through how to set them up if you don't know, and cover off some of the interesting highlights of the design of them, and talk to you about how to fit them in the case and more besides. I'm also going to show off Corsair's premium PSU cables, which are an alternative optional extra purchase to improve the aesthetics of your case and also make life a bit easier. But the main focus is going to be showing you how to install these power supply units and what cables go where. So if you're a new builder and you're not too sure, this should hopefully be useful. Now, the bonus of these modular power supply units is that the cables obviously aren't installed in the PSU when you get out of the box, and that means you only need to plug in what you need. And this is obviously going to vary from machine to machine and depending on whether you're installing hard drives and other things as well. But I'm going to talk you through and show you what's included and talk about where those should be plugged in to make life a bit easier, hopefully. Now, this will mostly apply to all Corsair's modular power supply units because the setup's basically the same. There are removable cables that are easy to plug in. The PSUs are nicely labeled, so you can see the RM850X, the black version here, for example, and the cables that come with that. You mostly get the same cables, but are just slightly different quality. I think the ones included with the white RM850 were slightly nicer, and as I said later on, I'll be showing you the premium individually sleeved cables. Those are a really good quality as well. So the main cables that you want to install to begin with, the essential one is the 24-pin motherboard power supply cable. This is split into two parts, and you can see it here. On the top right, it says motherboard, and you'll have the connection for the 24-pin. They're split into two parts, and you can't plug these in the wrong place because they won't plug in anywhere else. But you need to make sure this is obviously for the motherboard power connection. On one end, it's split into two parts. On the other end, it's just 24 pins, and that usually plugs in on the right-hand side of your motherboard, and I'll show you where later on. I'd recommend as well installing all these cables before you put the power supply unit in your case, because that makes life a lot easier. You then don't have to reach into the case and try and work out where each one goes. The next one is the CPU power connectors. You usually find, especially with high-end motherboards, that you have two of these. They're 8-pin power connections, and you'll see them marked as PCIe/CPU on the power supply unit, and you also see the cables are marked clearly with CPU on one side of them. So you plug in both of those, assuming that you have two connections on your motherboard. It's worth checking that whether you have two. You might just have one, or you might only have the 24-pin. It really depends on the level of your motherboard and whether it's capable of overclocking, whether it needs loads of power, etc. But generally, you'll find you have the 24-pin and at least one 8-pin CPU connector. The other thing that you might need is the PCIe cables. These are used for your graphics card. Now, the number that you'll need to plug in will vary, but again, you look for the PCIe connection on one end, and then the other end of the cable typically has two different connections on them. You'll see them sort of chained together. You'll have one with 6 pins in it and then two additional ones, and they'll go into your graphics card. This cable is SATA power. This is a flat power connector. You'll look for the SATA connection on the PSU. You can see it here in the top left. This does the connection for your things like hard drives, SSDs, and fan controllers and other peripherals that require a flat connection. So you can see a demonstration here on the black power supply unit from Corsair. And again, same sort of logic. On one end, it has the connectors that connect to the power supply, and then you have several of these flat connectors that run through the cable itself. The reason for that is you can actually connect up multiple drives. So you can connect multiple SSDs or hard disk drives or a mixture of the two on one single cable. So that gives you the bonus of daisy chaining those things up and connects them up easily. The flat connector, you can see here me demonstrating on a 6 terabyte hard drive, simply connects. And you can't get it the wrong way around because it has like an L shape built into the thing, so you can't plug it in the wrong way around. Obviously, you require that power cable, and then you also require the data connection cable from the hard drive or SSD to your motherboard. But that's how you do that. Again, make sure you install these cables before you go about plugging it in, because you can see just how difficult it will be if you're working in a smaller case. Once you've got the power supply unit into the case, trying to then work out where the cables are going to go based on the labeling becomes a bit more tricky. You'll also find additional cables for other peripherals and things there. Generally, they're not needed for the most part. So for the mounting of the power supply unit, tend to work out where it's going to sit so that it has access to air. So for example, you'll see the fan on this power supply unit needs to sit in a position where it can pull cold air into the power supply and then exhaust hot air out the rear. In this case that I'm using here, which is the Lian Li Air Mini, I'm mounting it this way on its side because there's a panel on the side which has holes in it, so it'll still be able to pull air into it. In some cases you might find you have to mount it so that the fan's face down towards the bottom of the case. That'll pull cold air in from underneath the case where there's venting, and then exhaust hot air out the rear of it. This keeps things cool. The bonus of this power supply unit from Corsair as well is that it has a 0 RPM mode, so if it doesn't need it, that fan won't spin, so it will run nice and quietly. Now, I'd also recommend, if you're going about the build process, that you run all the cables through to the front of your case before you start installing everything else. It makes life a lot easier. Here you can see the 24-pin power supply cable that clips in on the right-hand side of the motherboard, and you can see here a taste of the premium high-quality individually sleeved cables from Corsair. The CPU cables go onto the top of the motherboard, so I have two 8-pin CPU connections that plug in the left-hand top of the motherboard. This varies. It's worth checking your manual to work out which ones you need and where they plug in. Sometimes they're on the bottom, for example. Then you have the PCIe cables. You can see that this graphics card, the RTX 3090 from Gigabyte, requires 2 of these PCIe connections from the PSU. Some I've seen require 3, some require just 1, and that's obviously 8 pins split into 2, so it's a bit fiddly to get plugged in, but you can't plug it in the wrong way because there's a clip that holds it in place. So you just need to make sure you position it in a way where you're not going to be blocking any fans, and hopefully you can keep the cables nice and neat. If you are looking for particularly neat cables, these premium individually sleeved ones are much easier to do. You'll see that they have some clips on them that have teeth in them. You can adjust them, and it's easy to move the cables around and make them a bit neater than the standard ones that come with a power supply. But it is an optional extra purchase and it's not essential. So here you can see some of the finished product. Obviously the bonus of Velcro ties at the rear means that you can keep things a bit tidier. But in a small case you might find you have quite an excess of cables. I'd recommend getting as much of that to the back as possible and hiding it away, because it allows for better airflow at the front to ensure all the components are nicely cooled. And the end result should be a nicely working machine. You have your 24-pin, both CPU power connectors, all your drives connected up as well, and obviously any fan power as well that you need for the connections on that, say for Corsair's Commander Pros or for Lian Li's little control box, NZXT Smart Hub. Those sorts of things will require SATA power, so that's that flat power connector. So here you can see a quick look at the Pro PSU cable kit. So this basically replaces the standard cables that come with a power supply unit. It is an additional purchase, but it does allow for a much nicer looking build, a better build quality, and a nice overall aesthetic, thanks to those individually sleeved cables, which are easier to negotiate around your case, easier to move about, easier to position in a way that looks good. Also, because of those teethed grips on there, you can basically ensure that the overall finish is much nicer and you can set it up in a good way. And these replace the cables. They're also nicely labeled, obviously, with CPU and the other things, PCIe as well, so you know which is what, but you have everything that you need and they are much better quality. The overall end result ends up coming out a lot nicer and a lot more pleasing. Hopefully you found this video useful and gives you insight into how to install it and my tips for doing so. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Thanks for watching. This has been the Provoked Prawn. Hope you found this video useful, interesting, hilarious, or otherwise. Take a look at these other videos that I think you might find interesting as well. And have a look at the description for links and other information you might find useful. Click that join button to see the benefits of being a member of my YouTube channel. And most importantly, Have a great life.